For the first time in a decade, these paddocks are without crops on Peter Mailer's farm.
When I started farming, we were relying on one good year in 5. In the last 3 years, this is our 3rd miss.
It's too dry to plant chickpeas in these fields, near Goondiwindi on the Queensland-New South Wales border. It's not just due to the drought, says Peter Mailer, but because of climate change too.
Climate change is now causing me to have less confidence in the likelihood of getting a normal season. But, you know, and that's what we've witnessed since I started farming. We've seen every extreme we've seen since I started farming. Previous generation didn't see that. And it's getting more extreme. And so, yeah, I mean, we're at the point now of trying to decide whether we keep farming or we don't. Well, every part of our system is about maximising the efficiency of water. So
a third-generation farmer, Peter Mailer leases much of his 6,000-acre property. Margins have always been tight on his rotating crops of wheat, chickpeas and broad beans.
Everything we do is about trying to get a planting opportunity, and these conditions are beyond our ability to manage. That's where we're at. So heat is a compounding factor on losing the moisture that we need to get the crop growing.
Is it your bet that it's going to get worse?
Look, yeah, absolutely. My bet is that the high temperatures are here to stay, and that is a serious threat to the way that we farm and how we manage that lack of rainfall.
He thinks climate change is now generating extremes beyond his vast experience to manage.
You can't keep arguing that this is just a cycle. Yes, there are dry periods, and yes, there are wetter periods, yes, there are warm periods, and yes, there are cool periods, but we have shifted the averages, the baselines have moved to the point now where we are unable to manage the impact of those extreme events in that set.
The farmer's trick bag has run out of tricks?
We're running out of tricks. So agriculture is a gamble, and every time, you know, temperatures rise and you know, the impact of climate change rolls down, the odds keep moving in favour of the house.
Droughts are on track to get worse, says the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. A landmark report released yesterday said that if greenhouse gas emissions continue as they are, the world will warm by 1.5 degrees by 2040.
We've always experienced extreme events. However, the evidence is we'll see more of those types of events in the future, and relative to global warming, those events will become more extreme.
Dr. Sarah Perkins-Kirkpatrick is a climate scientist specialising in extreme heat events.
Well, New South Wales is in the midst of a bad drought right now. Droughts like that come on quite quickly and are quite intense, are more likely in a 2-degree warmer world compared to a 1.5-degree warmer world, and especially compared to now as well.
The IPCC says committed action, including phasing out coal by 2050, could prevent a much more damaging 2-degree rise. There's no commitment to that from the federal government.
I'm going to consider things that I think will A, ensure that we get electricity prices down when it comes to energy, and I always consider things that help us practically meet our environmental targets, which is incredibly important to all Australians as well.
National Farmers Federation President Fiona Simpson runs cattle near Tamworth in New South Wales.
On this farm we've been here for 90 years, and if we look back over the 90 years, we've seen a series of droughts come and go. Right now I think farmers certainly are looking at the climate change and the work that's being done on climate change and the heating of the earth and thinking about how that will affect them on farms.
The National Farmers Federation says the question now is not whether climate change is real, but what to do about it.
Farmers look at science. We are very interested in science and fact and evidence, and we think now there is, plenty of evidence on the table that climate change is a factor that we're going to have to deal with here in Australia. So let's make sure that we can incorporate it into our policies in a way that where we can continue to be productive and profitable, where we can continue to be sustainable.
Peter Mailer was a National Party voter until founding his own party to run against Barnaby Joyce in last December's New England by-election.
I mean, we're not going to get a coherent policy around drought if we don't deal with climate. We've got no chance of getting a coherent policy around climate if people won't admit that there's something here that needs to be done.
Sick of waiting for leadership from Canberra, Peter Mailer takes 7:30 to see a solution of his own.
What about the argument that it doesn't really matter what Australia does? It's only if the rest of the world takes action that the climate would shift in the right direction.
Yeah, so Australia's probably more exposed to the effects of climate change than a lot of other places, to be honest. We already operate in some of the most volatile weather conditions in the world, and climate change means those conditions are going to be more volatile and more extreme. As an affluent first world nation, we have an obligation to show leadership in this space. If we don't show leadership and start to be proactive, then who will? It's pretty simple.
Peter's parents have built a solar farm on their property and are selling electricity back into the grid.
It's producing enough power for about 1,370 homes. That's most of the homes in Gundawindi, which is literally just across the river. There's some irony here, because in spite of the government restriction and obstruction and everything else that's going on, this investment's making money, and it's good for mitigating climate. So it ticks all the boxes, and it's happening in spite of the politicians. My farm, on the other hand, won't survive and can't be justified the way things are going at the moment. If we can't mitigate climate, then I seriously doubt that we'll be able to justify the investment in agriculture.
But you can make money out of this.
Absolutely.
Better money.
Better money, safer money, easier money doing this.
Certainly any sort of change will cost money in the short term, but by far, if we do not mitigate climate change, the costs in the future will be a lot worse.
Politicians have to stop undermining science. And the politics has to stop trumping the science. We've got to depoliticise the conversation, because this shouldn't be about factions and power grabs. This needs to be about the future for our kids.